He used to be the kind of person who laughed loudly whenever the Quran was mentioned. For him, it was nothing more than an ancient book, filled with stories and teachings that belonged to another time, irrelevant and even amusing. He made jokes about it, sharing witty remarks with friends, mocking its verses, as if they were nothing but fairy tales. His skepticism was strong, and he often dismissed the faith of millions around the world as baseless. To him, religion was an easy target for humor, and the Quran in particular seemed like the perfect subject for ridicule. This attitude wasn't born out of malice. Rather, it came from a place of ignorance and a lack of true understanding. He had never seriously engaged with the text, never tried to grasp its deeper meanings, or considered the possibility that there might be more to it than he had assumed. Then, one day, everything changed. It was unexpected and sudden. Amid his usual lighthearted mockery, he stumbled upon a single verse. A verse that stopped him cold, as if time itself had frozen. The words on that page seemed to leap out with an undeniable power, carrying a wisdom so profound that it pierced through his doubts and defenses. It wasn't just a statement, it was a challenge, an invitation to reconsider everything he thought he knew. The verse spoke of truths that transcended culture, era, and prejudice. It awakened something inside him that he hadn't felt before, a stirring of awe, curiosity, and deep respect. For the first time, the Quran was no longer just a subject of jokes. It had become a source of profound reflection. That moment of shock was also a moment of awakening. He realized that his previous attitude was shallow and incomplete. The verse made him question the foundations of his disbelief. How could a book, revealed over 14 centuries ago, contain messages that still rang true in the complexities of modern life? How had he missed this depth all along? These questions echoed in his mind relentlessly. He felt compelled to look closer, to read beyond the surface, and to understand what lay beneath the words he had once mocked. The journey from mockery to contemplation was not easy. It stirred an internal conflict within him, between the comfort of his old beliefs and the unsettling pull of something new. Driven by this inner turmoil, he began to explore Islam with a genuine openness. He read the Quran carefully, line by line, seeking answers not to argue against it, but to understand it. The more he read, the more he saw a coherence and a beauty that he had never imagined possible. The stories of prophets, the call for justice, the emphasis on mercy, and the guidance for a balanced life. All these elements resonated deeply within him. He found himself drawn not only to the text, but to the lives of those who lived by its teachings. It was a gradual transformation, a slow peeling away of misconceptions and prejudices, replaced by growing admiration and respect. What had begun as a joke turned into a profound spiritual journey. That one verse had shattered the walls of doubt and opened the door to faith. He realized that the Quran was not just a historical artifact or a set of rules. It was a living message that spoke to the heart and mind alike. It challenged him to think critically, to act ethically, and to seek a deeper connection with the Creator. The shock he once felt transformed into a source of inspiration, leading him toward a path of personal growth and meaning. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, even a single moment of clarity can change the course of a life forever. He used to be someone who found the Quran nothing more than a subject for jokes. Whenever the Quran was mentioned, he would laugh and make fun of it openly, convinced that it was just an old book filled with outdated ideas. To him, the Quran was irrelevant in the modern world, and he never took it seriously. His mockery was casual but constant. He shared jokes about it with friends and dismissed it as something that held no real value or truth. This attitude stemmed from a place of skepticism and a lack of understanding. He hadn't taken the time to explore its teachings or reflect on its message. Instead, he chose to treat it as a target for humor. For years, he held this view firmly. He believed that religion in general, and Islam in particular, was an easy subject to mock. His jokes were a way to reinforce his own disbelief and to distance himself from what he saw as superstition. At social gatherings, he would make remarks that got laughs, and this only strengthened his confidence in his position. He saw himself as someone enlightened, above the blind faith of others. Deep down, perhaps, he was also protecting himself from questions he was not ready to face. What made his mockery so strong was his complete lack of engagement with the Quran's actual content. He had never read it seriously or tried to understand its context. The verses were just words to him, easy to dismiss as old-fashioned or irrelevant. This kind of surface-level attitude is common when someone is unfamiliar with a subject but feels the need to take a stand. For him, mocking the Quran was a way to assert control over his beliefs and to avoid any challenge to his worldview. This phase of his life was marked by certainty, but it was also fragile. His laughter hid an inner resistance to change, and his jokes were a shield against deeper reflection. Little did he know that this very attitude would soon be confronted by something so powerful it would make him stop and reconsider everything he thought he knew. The journey from mockery to respect would begin with just one verse, but until that moment he remained firmly rooted in his skepticism, laughing at a book he had never truly understood. One day, while scrolling through an online discussion about religion, he came across a verse from the Quran that caught his attention, not because he intended to read it seriously, but because it stood out amid the usual debates and jokes. The verse was striking in its clarity and depth, something he hadn't expected to find in a text he had always dismissed. It was as if the words were speaking directly to him, challenging his long-held assumptions. Suddenly, the carefree laughter and mockery stopped. The verse had frozen him in place, forcing him to pause and reflect. This moment was unlike anything he had experienced before. The verse didn't just state facts or tell a story. It conveyed a powerful message that resonated with his own questions and struggles. It was clear, concise, and full of wisdom, qualities he had never associated with the Quran before. The impact was immediate. He felt a shock, a sudden jolt that disrupted the ease with which he had dismissed the scripture. It was as if a door had been opened that he never knew existed, revealing a glimpse of something profound and meaningful. What made this verse so powerful was not only its content, but the way it seemed to answer questions he had long ignored. It spoke of truth, justice, and the human condition in a way that transcended culture and time. For the first time, he realized that the Quran was more than just stories or rules. It was a book that addressed the deepest concerns of the human heart and mind. The words stirred something inside him, curiosity mixed with confusion, and even a little fear. Could it be that he had been wrong all along? Could this ancient text really hold wisdom relevant to his life? This verse became a turning point because it challenged his identity as a skeptic and forced him to confront the possibility that his mockery was based on ignorance. It was a moment of reckoning, where the walls of his disbelief began to crack. He found himself wanting to know more, to understand why this verse affected him so deeply. The shock he felt was not just intellectual, but emotional, touching a part of him that had remained closed off for years. In that instant, the joke was over. The Quran was no longer a subject of ridicule, but a source of profound reflection. This single verse had the power to stop him in his tracks and invite him on a journey he never expected. One of discovery, questioning, and ultimately transformation. The impact of that one verse went far beyond just a momentary pause in his mocking attitude. It shook him to the core, revealing layers of meaning he had never anticipated. The verse was not merely poetic or symbolic. It carried a message that challenged his entire worldview. It spoke with clarity about concepts like truth, justice, accountability, and the nature of existence. For someone who had treated the Quran as a relic of the past, this was both startling and humbling. As he reflected more on the verse, he began to realize that its wisdom was deeply relevant to his own life and to the modern world around him. The verse did not simply make claims, but invited him to think critically and reflect on his own experiences. It raised questions about purpose and meaning, questions he had never seriously asked before. The language of the verse was powerful, yet precise, and it struck a balance between warning and hope. This combination was unlike anything he had expected from a text he had dismissed so easily. What made the verse even more impactful was how it addressed human nature with remarkable insight. It spoke of accountability, not just in an abstract religious sense, but as a real and immediate truth. It reminded him that actions have consequences, and that justice would be served in ways he had not considered. The verse also offered hope, a chance for mercy and forgiveness, emphasizing that change and growth were always possible. These ideas resonated deeply, shaking the foundations of his previous disbelief. He found himself unable to stop thinking about the verse. It was as if the words were echoing inside his mind, pushing him to question more and dig deeper. This verse wasn't just information, it was an invitation to transformation. The shock it created forced him to confront uncomfortable truths and to reconsider the value of the Quran as a whole. For the first time, the Quran was no longer a book to mock. It was a book that demanded attention and respect. In the days that followed, the memory of that verse stayed with him, haunting and inspiring him at the same time. It opened his eyes to the possibility that the Quran contained a profound truth that transcended his previous judgments. This realization marked the beginning of a significant inner shift, a move from ignorance to inquiry, from dismissal to genuine curiosity. The verse had done more than freeze him in shock. It had ignited the spark of a journey toward understanding and faith. After the shock of that one verse, he found himself caught in a storm of emotions and thoughts. For years, his attitude toward the Quran had been one of dismissal and ridicule, but now a deep inner conflict began to take shape. On one hand, he felt the pull of his old skepticism and the comfort of familiar beliefs. On the other hand, the power of that verse stirred something new inside him, a mix of curiosity, confusion, and a yearning to know more. This inner turmoil wasn't easy to face. It challenged the identity he had built around his disbelief. Suddenly, the jokes and mockery that once gave him confidence now felt hollow. The verse had opened a door to questions he had avoided for years. Could there be truth in the Quran? Was it possible that his assumptions were wrong? What if this book held answers to the very doubts he had been suppressing? His mind raced with doubts and questions. He struggled to reconcile the shock of the verse with his previous beliefs. At times, he wanted to push the verse away, to return to the comfort of ridicule and certainty, but each time he tried, the memory of that powerful message pulled him back. It was like a seed planted deep inside, slowly growing roots despite his resistance. This internal conflict pushed him into a state of restless curiosity. He began to wonder what else the Quran might say. Could there be more verses with the same profound meaning? Was it worth reading the entire book seriously, not just mocking bits and pieces? The idea of exploring Islam honestly, without prejudice, started to take shape in his mind. For the first time, he considered the possibility that the Quran was not just a book of old tales, but a living text with relevance for today's world. This period of inner struggle was crucial. It was the space between mockery and belief, between ignorance and understanding. He realized that transformation does not happen overnight, but begins with questioning and doubt. The verse had shaken his certainty and planted the seed of change. But it was up to him to nurture that seed through honest exploration. In that moment, the journey from mockery to faith began, not with certainty, but with a humble, open heart willing to seek the truth. The shock of the verse had done more than silence his jokes. It had awakened a desire to learn, reflect, and grow. This inner conflict was the necessary first step on the path toward a deeper understanding of the Quran and ultimately of Islam itself. Motivated by the shock and inner conflict sparked by that one powerful verse, he decided to take a step he had never imagined before. He began seeking answers. No longer content with surface-level jokes or dismissive remarks, he opened the Quran with a new mindset, eager to explore its teachings seriously. This was the beginning of a journey that would challenge him intellectually and spiritually, pushing him to rethink everything he believed. At first, reading the Quran felt unfamiliar and sometimes difficult. The language was rich and the ideas deep, demanding careful thought and reflection. Yet, the more he read, the more he discovered a remarkable coherence and wisdom in the text. Unlike other books he had encountered, the Quran addressed complex questions about life, morality, and the universe with clarity and logic. He was struck by how the Quran encouraged questioning, reasoning, and self-reflection rather than blind acceptance. As he delved deeper, he encountered stories of prophets who had faced challenges similar to those in his own life, guidance on justice and compassion, and teachings that emphasized mercy and kindness. These were not just abstract concepts, but practical advice for living a balanced and meaningful life. This made the Quran come alive for him in a way he had never expected. It was no longer a book of jokes or criticism, but a source of insight and guidance. His exploration also brought him into contact with Muslims who lived by the Quran's teachings. Observing their character, kindness, and dedication deepened his respect for the faith. He realized that Islam was not merely a set of rituals, but a complete way of life, aimed at bettering the individual and society. This personal connection helped him see beyond stereotypes and misconceptions he had previously held. Throughout this process, his skepticism remained, but it was now accompanied by genuine curiosity and openness. He asked difficult questions and sought thoughtful answers, willing to reconsider his assumptions. The Quran's message, combined with the example of its followers, challenged him to grow and reflect on his own values and beliefs. This journey, from mockery to exploration, was transformative. It marked a turning point where he moved from dismissal to engagement, from ignorance to knowledge. The shock of one verse had led him to a path of sincere seeking, laying the foundation for a profound spiritual awakening. This was not the end, but the beginning of a lifelong journey toward understanding and faith. That one verse, which had frozen him in shock, did more than just shake his beliefs. It ignited a transformation that changed his entire life. Over time, his initial curiosity grew into a deep respect for the Quran and its message. The mocking laughter that once defined his relationship with Islam was replaced by sincere reflection and a desire for truth. This change was not sudden, but gradual, built on countless moments of reading, questioning, and understanding. He began to see the Quran not as a book of fairy tales or outdated rules, but as a living guide that spoke to the human experience across all times and cultures. The wisdom in its verses addressed universal themes: justice, mercy, the purpose of life, and the nature of God. These teachings resonated with him personally, touching his heart and mind in ways he had never anticipated. The Quran's call for compassion and balance challenged him to rethink his own values and actions. More than that, the verse that first shocked him had opened a door to a journey of spiritual awakening. He found himself drawn to learn about the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the history of Islam, and the experiences of Muslims around the world. This exploration helped him understand the faith in a fuller, more human way, breaking down stereotypes and misconceptions. His transformation also affected his relationships. Friends and family noticed the change in his outlook, his newfound patience, humility, and kindness. The journey from mockery to respect inspired others around him to question their own assumptions and explore their beliefs with an open heart. His story became a powerful example of how one moment of clarity can lead to profound personal growth. Ultimately, the verse that once froze him in shock became the starting point of a meaningful connection with Islam. It taught him that true faith is not blind acceptance, but an ongoing process of seeking, learning, and growing. The transformation was not just about changing beliefs, but about finding peace, purpose, and hope. His journey reminds us all that sometimes it takes just one powerful moment, one verse, one idea, one experience, to open our hearts and minds to truth. From mockery to respect, from doubt to faith, that single verse changed everything. It showed him the way to a life filled with meaning and a relationship with the Quran that continues to inspire and guide him every day. In conclusion, this story shows us how a single moment, one powerful verse, can completely change a person's perspective. What began as mockery and doubt transformed into curiosity, reflection, and ultimately, respect and faith. It reminds us that no matter how far someone may seem from belief, a sincere encounter with truth can open hearts and minds in the most unexpected ways. The journey from skepticism to understanding is deeply personal, but it is always possible, and it often begins with just one step. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. I hope it inspires you to approach questions of faith with an open heart and mind, and to remember that every journey starts with a single moment of realization. If you found this meaningful, feel free to share it with others who might benefit. May we all continue seeking truth and finding peace on our own paths. Thank you again for being here.